Right now, as you watch this video, young North Koreans are crossing the Tumen River in the dark chest deep in ice-cold water, one hand holding their only bag above their heads. Sung Hyok made that crossing. He was not a dissident. He was not a criminal. He was the regime's model young citizen until the night a trusted colleague vanished without a trace. And he understood that no one inside that system is ever truly safe. His story is not history. It's happening right now. Your subscription amplifies these urgent voices. Join us in making a difference. This is where it all started. Call me Sung Hyok. Born and raised in Pyongyang's Jungguyok, the Central District. Think of it as the heart of the capital. The equivalent of living right next to the White House in Washington, D.C. That's where I grew up every morning. I opened my window and saw the walls of the Supreme Guard Command. The neighbors always said the same thing. The great leader watches over this neighborhood. The people here are blessed. Not once did I question that. My father was a low-ranking party official. Nothing prestigious, but our rations arrived on time. The heat never cut out in winter. When I'd hear at the Jongmadong, the street market, that ordinary people were surviving on corn porridge, it felt like a story from another world. Because for me it was, on holidays my mother made dububap tofu rice and tiok, traditional rice cakes. Back then, North Korea was simply the place where I lived. Nothing was missing. Nothing was wrong. At 17, I was admitted to the affiliated high school of Kim Il-sung Teachers University. My songbun, the hereditary class status that determines your future in North Korea, was good. My grades were good. The school wasn't for everyone. Every friend I made there came from a similar background. At least one parent was either a party official or a military officer. We used to joke among ourselves, we're the ones who will run this country someday. Looking back now, I can't believe how naive we were. But back then, every one of us believed it. After graduation, I was assigned as a guidance officer in the propaganda department of the Korean Workers' Party Youth League, Jungguyok Branch, Pyongyang. Think of it as a district-level civil servant handling youth affairs. My job was organizing ideological education sessions for young people, planning slogan rallies. For the great leader's birthday, I coordinated the torch marches. For the party founding anniversary, I managed the mass gymnastics mobilization. Looking back, it was all hollow pageantry. But at the time, I genuinely believed I was doing something that mattered. The job wasn't bad. A senior official named Chol Min looked out for me. 5 years older, sharp, quick to read any room. On my first day, still fumbling through everything, he sidled up and said quietly, "Sung Hyok, there's only one thing you need to know to survive here. Do what you're told. Ask nothing." At the time, it sounded like a joke from an older colleague. It would take me a while to understand how much weight those words carried. After work, he and I sometimes walked near the Jangmadong. The Central District market was better stocked than the ones outside the capital. Chinese snacks and whispers that USB drives with South Korean dramas were quietly circulating. Neither of us touched any of it. Why risk it? One wrong move and the fallout lands on our families. We were both the same on that point. Kids from good households had to be careful. The days blurred into each other. Show up. Chant the slogans, fill out the paperwork, schedule the youth sessions, come home to whatever my mother had prepared. When a motorcade passed near the Supreme Guard Command, the whole neighborhood stopped and bowed. So did I. Not out of fear, it was simply what you did, what you had always been taught to do. Then something cracked, something small. It happened during a youth league assembly. I stepped up to the podium, the same as always, and led the chant. We pledge our loyalty to the great leader. A chant I'd led 100 times before. But that day, the sound coming out of my mouth felt distant, like hearing a stranger's voice played back through a speaker. I pushed the feeling aside. Just tired, I told myself. But that moment had already set something loose inside me, something that couldn't be put back. That night is still vivid. It was early fall 2025, an ordinary evening. I came home, ate the dinner my mother had left out, and went to bed early. Nothing unusual. Then, sometime past midnight, I snapped awake. For a second, I thought it was a dream. I rubbed my eyes. The sound kept going. Helicopters. In the Central District, helicopters aren't unusual. Military aircraft pass through. But this was different. Not one. Several. And they were flying low enough that the window panes trembled. I pulled the curtain back and looked out. Over the direction of the Supreme Guard Command, beams of light were slicing through the sky searchlights, crossing and sweeping fast, and below them engines. Big vehicles, moving quickly one after another. After midnight, this street was always silent. Strange, I thought, but not alarming. Night emergency drills happen near the command sometimes. I lay back down. Sleep didn't come for a long time. The sound continued for at least 30 minutes before fading. The next morning, I walked into the office and stopped. Chol Min's desk was empty. Running late, I assumed. It happens sometimes. But he didn't come in all morning. No message by noon. I leaned over to a colleague. "Where is Comrade O today?" The colleague glanced at me for just a moment, then said he didn't know. The expression on his face said otherwise. That afternoon, a brief notice came down from above. Comrade Chol Min had been transferred to another department. No department named. Transfers can happen suddenly, but not like this. There had been no word the day before. Not even from O himself. We were close. A transfer announcement and not a single goodbye? Nothing. Walking home that evening, I replayed the helicopters. Then I overlaid them with the empty desk. Something connected them, I could feel it. But I couldn't see what. My father's voice came back to me. "See only what you see. Hear only what you hear. Nothing beyond that is your concern." I repeated it to myself the whole way home. My feet felt heavier than usual. A few days later, I happened to pass Chol Min's house. The curtains were drawn. In the middle of the afternoon. The little girl who always played in the yard gone. My steps slowed. Then I walked faster. Instinct. You don't stand still in front of a house like that. That night, his last words came back to me. "There's only one way to survive here. Do what you're told. Ask nothing." It didn't sound like advice anymore. It was a warning. And whether he had failed to follow it or followed it and still paid the price, I had no way of knowing. What I did know, something inside me had shifted. Permanently. A month after Chol Min disappeared, I kept the same routine. Show up. Chant. File the papers. Go home. But my eyes had changed. Things I used to walk past were landing differently. The office had gone quiet. When O was there was at least occasional banter, lunch hour small talk. After he vanished, people kept their heads down. No eye contact. To test it, I started conversations first. Same result every time, a short answer, then eyes averted. Then one day I was called in by a senior official, someone who had never summoned me directly before, high-ranking enough that I straightened my back walking into his office. He studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Comrade Sung Hyok, how have things been lately?" "Fine," I said. "No problems." He nodded. Then, "Open your mouth again and you'll end up like Chol Min." The air went out of the room. My face stayed still. I have no idea how. He continued, "I've heard you've been asking questions of people in this department." I said no, just routine work talk. He looked at me for another moment. "Keep it that way." That was all. Walking out, my legs were shaking. After that, I shut down completely. No questions. Nothing. But a strange thing happened. When the mouth closes, the eyes sharpen. The Jangmadang rumors I'd always let slide now snagged on something inside me. Word was circulating about young soldiers who had come back from Ukraine. As you may know, North Korea sent troops to support Russia in the war. Some of them had returned. And what they were saying was hard to believe. I overheard a Korean-Chinese woman at the market, voice low, relaying what she'd been told. The Russian soldiers had said it straight to the North Korean boys' faces. "Your leader sold you as cannon fodder." I went home and sat without moving for a long time. The great leader loves the people. He sacrifices everything for the people. I had heard that sentence thousands of times, believed it thousands of times. But the men coming back from Ukrainian fields were saying something else. They said we had been sold. I tried to shake it loose. This time it wouldn't go. Then came more. Days later, Chol Min's family had disappeared from Pyongyang. Not moved. Gone. Overnight. No trace. Neighbors whispered it in hushed tones, and no one spoke it above a murmur. Real fear settled into my chest for the first time. I didn't know what had happened to Chol Min. I didn't know where his family had gone. And I understood then that knowing was something I couldn't afford. That night I stared at the ceiling and thought, where exactly am I standing? The regime's most trusted ground, and I was becoming the person most afraid of it. The decision came at another Youth League assembly. I stepped up to the podium. Same chant. We pledge our loyalty to the great leader. Hundreds of voices filling the hall. But standing there, leading them, I found myself looking out at all those faces and asking a question I'd never asked before. Do they feel it too? That this is hollow? Or do they actually believe? I couldn't tell. After the meeting, I stayed alone in the office. Through the window, I could see the command's wall. What happened behind that wall the night Chol Min disappeared? Where is he now? What happens to me? Three questions circling simultaneously. On the walk home, I passed the Jangmadang at closing time. An elderly woman was packing up the last of her corn. A small boy, probably her grandson, crouched beside her, tugging at her skirt. Hungry, she pressed a single ear of corn into his hands. His eyes lit up. My feet stopped. At that age, I'd had tiok at every holiday. Heat in winter. Never once had I tugged at anyone's skirt for food. I asked myself for the first time and meant it whether that was luck or whether something was broken in this country. The great leader serves the people. So why was that child right there in front of me? No answer came. That night I sat across from my father. He'd come home from work and was reading the paper. I waited a long time before I spoke. "Father, is it all right for us to stay here?" He set the paper down, said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, Sung Hyok, "Don't ever say that again." Fear had gone rigid across his face. That was my answer. I made my decision that night. I had to leave. I couldn't tell him. He had built his entire life inside this system. The shock of knowing would be more than I could do to him. So I kept it locked inside and hoped that someday, somehow, he would understand. Preparation was careful and slow. My biggest asset was the party cadre ID. That card could get me through checkpoints with far less scrutiny. I started increasing the frequency of official provincial work trips, a plausible cover. As I traveled, I quietly mapped the roads toward the border and noted checkpoint locations. The key was gathering intelligence without leaving a trace. The night before I left, I walked through the house one last time. The courtyard where my mother made kimchi every autumn. The chair where my father read the paper. The desk where I'd spread out my textbooks as a child. I took it all in, knowing I might never see any of it again. I stood in front of my parents' bedroom door. I couldn't open it. If I had, I wouldn't have been able to leave. I stood there in the dark and said it without sound, "Father, Mother, I'm sorry, and thank you." I left at 400 in the morning. The paperwork was already filed an official trip to North Hamgyong Province for Youth League coordination work. At the first two checkpoints leaving Pyongyang, the soldiers barely glanced at my ID before waving me through. I kept my breathing steady, kept my face calm. As I got closer to North Hamgyong, I left the vehicle and continued on foot. A car becomes conspicuous in certain stretches. One bag. The bare minimum, a change of clothes, a small amount of corn flour for emergencies, and my ID. That was everything. The mountain trails were harder than I expected. My military service was years behind me. My legs went heavy sooner than they should have. But stopping wasn't an option. I knew what stopping meant. The second night, deep in the mountains, lying under a cover of leaves, a dog started barking in the distance. Patrol units move with dogs. I didn't breathe. Didn't move. I prayed to whatever could hear me let it pass. Let it go the other way. The barking grew closer. Then the direction shifted. Faded. Something gave way in my chest and my eyes stung. Whether it was fear or relief, I couldn't say. Both, maybe. At dawn on the third day, the Tumen River. My legs gave the moment I saw it. The Tumen isn't wide, not compared to Seoul's Han River. But standing at its bank that night, it was the widest thing I had ever seen. I crouched at the edge and stared across. China. A few scattered lights on the other side. Just reach those lights, I told myself. I put my foot in. Cold. September, but mountain-fed water cold enough to ache in the bone. I clenched my jaw and took the first step. Halfway across, my foot slipped on a rock. My body lurched sideways. Water rushed up to my chest. I held the bag above my head and fought for balance. Heart hammering. I found my footing. Kept moving. The water reached my waist. The river stones underfoot were sharp and shifting. I walked anyway, one foot then the other. When I reached the far bank, I went down on my knees in the dirt. I caught my breath. Soaked through, hands trembling. I looked back once the river behind me, the dark northern sky beyond it. I said the words silently toward that sky. I'm going now. Setting foot on Chinese soil, I believed I was free. That was wrong. I moved in the direction I'd planned toward the Korean-Chinese communities near the border. Ethnic Koreans, known as Joseonjak, who still speak the language. By the time dawn broke, I reached the outskirts of a small village. At the first house I came to, I hesitated. Knocking on that door meant exposing myself completely to a stranger. The risk was obvious. I knocked anyway. The woman who answered looked to be in her 70s. She spoke Korean Joseonjak as I'd hoped. She took one look at me and stepped aside to let me in without a word. I can't describe what that gesture meant. She boiled water and brought out cornbread. Sitting there eating it, something threatened to come apart behind my eyes. Then she said, "You can't stay long. The crackdowns are bad right now." That brought me back. In China, North Korean defectors are illegal immigrants. Caught means forcibly returned. You know what that leads to. I had one day. Then I had to move. The woman connected me to someone, a South Korean missionary working nearby, someone who had helped people in exactly this situation before. Contact was made carefully. A few days later, with his help, I was moved somewhere safer. That was where I encountered the internet for the first time in my life. The missionary had a small computer. With shaking hands, I typed North Korea into the search bar. I stared at the screen for a long time without speaking. Everything I had taught young people as a propaganda officer, the great leader's achievements, the superiority of the system, I was seeing how the outside world understood it. Something collapsed inside me that I couldn't name. I found articles about the Ukraine deployment. What I'd only heard as market rumors was documented in real news. North Korean soldiers used as cannon fodder in Russia. Casualty numbers cited in print. Those boys had grown up chanting the same loyalty slogans I had, and that loyalty had cost them their lives on someone else's battlefield. I asked the missionary, "Are there many people who come from North Korea?" He said yes. Growing numbers, especially young people lately. Something settled in me then. I hadn't been alone in this. North Korea's young generation was starting to move. 3 months in China. Hidden. With the missionary's help, I moved several times. One location too long is one location too many. The Chinese authorities were more aggressive than I'd anticipated. Once word came that there had been a raid near where I was staying. I packed in under an hour and was gone. That was the third move. Each time I relocated, I felt myself becoming thinner, no name, no status, no existence outside of hiding. The route to South Korea, as the missionary arranged it, went through Southeast Asia. A direct crossing from China wasn't possible under the China-North Korea agreement. Capture in China means immediate repatriation. A third country was the only path. Getting out of China was the most tense of all of it. No airport I had no ID that would pass inspection. Overland crossing only, with the help of people whose methods I won't detail here. Describing it could endanger them. What I'll say is, without those people, I wouldn't be here. Southeast Asia in summer. Dense, humid heat I'd never felt before. I waited there for several days while the final arrangements were made to reach the South Korean consulate. Sleep was impossible. This close and something goes wrong at the last moment? The day came. I stood in front of the consulate building and paused. The South Korean flag was hanging there. In Pyongyang, that flag was the enemy's symbol, something to be burned, something to be despised. Standing in front of it then, something came loose in my eyes that I couldn't explain or stop. I knocked. A staff member opened the door and looked at me. I kept it short. "I'm from North Korea. I want to go to South Korea." He led me inside. My legs stopped working. I sat down on the floor right there in the entryway. He asked if I was all right. I nodded. For the first time, genuinely, completely, I was. The day I first set foot on South Korean soil is burned into me. Through the airplane window, Incheon Airport spread out below. Bright. Enormous. Clean. I thought, is this a dream? The last airport I'd seen was Pyongyang's Sunan, and now this entirely different world existed. At the Hanawon Resettlement Center, where North Korean defectors receive orientation and integration training, I was stunned by something new every day. Convenience stores open at 300 in the morning. I couldn't process that at first. Lights on, shelves full, all night. My first time in a supermarket, I stood frozen in the aisle. Rice stacked in quantities I'd never imagined. I thought of the Jangmadang bartering over a single measure of rice. A news broadcast came on the TV. The anchor was openly criticizing the North Korean regime, just saying it plainly on television. My jaw dropped. I knew exactly what that kind of talk would cost a person back home. Here it was just the news. When I opened YouTube for the first time, defector testimonials filled the screen. So many people had already made this same journey. One video showed a defector in tears, saying he missed the family he'd left behind. I watched that and wept for a long time, because that was me too. Father, mother, I miss you. You must be sick with worry I left without a word. What haunts me most is the thought that my leaving may have caused you trouble I can't see. If the day comes when this peninsula is reunified, the first place I will run is home. I can still smell the kimchi my mother made every autumn. In South Korea, I'm preparing for the GED equivalency exam. Starting over, late. The dialect here threw me at first, same language but dense with foreign loanwords. Still, we're the same people. I'll get there. When I meet South Korean peers my own age, something strange moves through me. same generation, but they were born into this freedom. They've never known anything else. One last thing before I go. In North Korea, I was exactly the kind of young man the regime trusted most. Good neighborhood, good position, and even I eventually turned away. This isn't just my story. Right now, somewhere in North Korea, there are young people standing at a podium and leading the same chants, and their hands are trembling. I want to speak to them directly. That trembling is not weakness. It's the truth. North Korea's young generation has started to move, and I am slowly beginning to understand where that movement leads. To everyone who listened to this testimony, thank you. From the bottom of my heart. My hope is that more people in situations like mine find their way to freedom, and that our generation lives to see the day this peninsula becomes one again. This video is an AI-assisted dramatic fiction based on composite North Korean defector testimonies. Names and certain circumstances have been fictionalized. No specific individuals or organizations are represented.